I attempted a Nuzlocke in Pokemon Battle Revolution. Here are the rules for the Nuzlocke. Some of the rules are changed from the original 3 rules because of how this game is played. Let's see how this Nuzlocke turns out. Here is the first Winter Pass. I started in the Gateway Coliseum, and my first opponent is Marcel. I started off as Jamirian and killed the Skip Loom, and it was killed by using Fire Fang. And thanks to the poison from Ivysaur, it killed the Spinner. Then decided to use Dragon Rays from Jamirian to kill the Dustox. And Marcel is defeated. This leads to the second opponent, Alec. I sent out Pidgeot to kill the Delcatty by using Aerial Ace. And then decided to use Pidgeot again to kill the Jigglypuff by using Aerial Ace. Then I used Pidgeot again to use Aerial Ace and kill the Spinner, which means I beat Alec. This leads to the third opponent, Brooke. I used Pidgeot Aerial Ace which killed the Lombre. I then used Whitehorn Stig to kill the Mawile, and I used Pidgeot's Aerial Ace again to kill the Dustox. And I beat Brooke. Which leads to the next opponent, Annie. I used Dragonel's Dragon Breath to kill the Silcoon. I then decided to use Pidgeot's Aerial Ace to kill the Sunflower. I then used Pidgeot's Aerial Ace again to kill the Lundred. And I beat Annie. Which leads to the next opponent, Cedric. And while battling Cedric, I used Whitehorn's Ice Fang to kill the Pidgeotto. And I used Pidgeot's Aerial Ace again to kill the Weeping Bell. And because of how OP Pidgeot is, it used Aerial Ace again to kill the Napalm, which means I beat Cedric. This leads to the semi-final against Crystal. And while battling against Crystal, I used Whitehorn Stig to kill the Sableye, and then used Whitehorn's Ice Fang to kill the Mothim. Because of how OP Whitehorn is, I let it use Ice Fang again and it killed the Farfetch. And I beat Crystal, which leads to the boss of the Coliseum, Joe. I used Dragonel's Shockwave to kill the Delibird, and sadly, thanks to the Drifloon's ominous wind, it kills the Whitehorn. And thanks to the Pidgeot's Aerial Ace, is able to kill the Drifloon, but sadly, thanks to the Drifloon's Aftermath, it kills the Pidgeot. Rest in pieces for both Whitehorn and Pidgeot. Thanks to Dragonel's Dragon Breath, it kills Joe's last Pokemon, Spinner. This means I beat Joe and clear the Gateway Coliseum. Here is the second Winter Pass. And now I am in the Main Street Coliseum, and my first opponent is Zachary. I sent out Monferno to use Magpus to kill Chimchar. I then sent out Prinplup to use Wall Pulse to kill Pidgeotto. And used Prinplup again to use Plug to defeat Butterfree. And I beat Zachary. Which leads to the second opponent, Eric. I used Gabite to use Aerial Ace against Riolu. And then used Gabite again to use Aerial Ace against Lombre. And because of how strong Gabite is, I let it use Dragon Pulse against Nosepass. Which means I beat Eric. Which leads to the next opponent, Melody. I sent out Stellaria to use Aerial Ace on Weeping Bell. And then I used Stellaria's Aerial Ace again to defeat Machop. Then I sent out Luxio to use Quick Attack against Butterfree, which means I beat Melanie, which leads to the next opponent, Alina. I sent out Luxio to use Spark against Jingling, and then continued to use Luxio to use Spark against Mawile. And because of how OP Luxio is, I use it again to use Spark against Lickitung, which means I beat Alina, which leads to the next opponent, Ariel. I sent out Luxio to use Spark against Poliwhirl, and then sent out Stellaria to use Aerial Ace against Wormadam, and I continued to use Stellaria to use Aerial Ace against Loftus. I beat Ariel and went to the semifinals against Todd. I sent out Gabite to use Dragon Pulse against Delcatty, then used Gabite again to use Aerial Ace against Mothim. And because of how difficult this Wormadam is, I sent out Luxio to use Bite against it. I beat Todd, and now I'm up against the boss of the Coliseum, Taylor. I sent out Gabite and used Dragon Pulse against Pasurishu, and I sent out Luxio to use Spark against Jigglypuff, and I continued to use Luxio to use Bite against Bonsly. I beat Taylor and cleared the Main Street Coliseum with no casualties. Now I am at the third Coliseum, the Waterfall Coliseum, and my first opponent is Damon. I sent out Luxio to use Spark against Lombre, then sent out Stellaria to use Aerial Ace on Nuzleaf. I then sent out Goodbye to use Dragon Pulse against Luxio. I beat Damon, which lead to the second opponent, Harry. I sent out Staravia to use Aerial Ace on Beedrill. I then sent out Luxio to use Spark on Beautyfly. I then sent out Goodbye to use Aerial Ace against Silcoon. I beat Harry, which leads to the next opponent, Desire. I sent out Luxio to use Spark against Locust. Then sent out Staravia to use Aerial Ace on Poliwhirl. I then sent out Goodbye to use Aerial Ace against Lombre. I beat Desire, which leads to the next opponent, Sierra. I sent out Goodbye to use Aerial Ace against Delibird. I sent out Staravia to use Aerial Ace against Apom. I then sent out Luxio to use Spark against Mothim. I beat Sierra, which leads to the next opponent, Ruben. I first sent out Goodbye to use Aerial Ace against Riolu. And sadly, Staravia was killed by Luxio's Bite of 87. And Luxio was killed as well by Machop's Spiral Throw. And thanks to Prinplup, it defeated Ponyta by using Water Pulse. And Water was able to beat Chimchar by using Rock Smash. I beat Ruben, which leads to the semifinals against River. I sent out Monferno to use Grass Knot against Poliwhirl. I then sent out Gualo to use Razor Leaf against Cilio. I then sent out Prinplup to use Plug against Lombre. I beat River, which leads to the boss of the Colosseum, Marina. I sent out Goodbye to use Aerial Ace against Womadan. I then sent out Prinplup to use Plug against Mawil. And sadly, Guano was killed by Farfetch's Aerial Ace. And I sent out Monferno to use Mach Punch against Poliwhirl. I beat Marina and cleared the Waterfall Coliseum, losing 3 Pokemon. For the next Coliseum, it involves spinning the Pokemon wheel. That means the Pokemon I will have in the party is depending on which Pokemon I selected from the Pokemon wheel. If the Pokemon I chose is from the Rental Pass and faints, then that Pokemon from the Rental Pass is dead. Here is the new Rental Pass. Let's spin the wheel. I got a Lumion and she got a Luxio. I got a Sneasel and she got a Blossom. I got a Plusle and she got a Bastion. And I got a Lopunny and she got a Snova. Now we are in the Neon Coliseum and my first opponent is Elisa. I used Sneasel to use X-Scissor on Blossom. I then sent out Lopunny to use Drain Punch on Battrodon. I then used Lopunny to use Dizzy Punch on Luxio, which doesn't kill it, but did get it confused, which then kill itself. The Plusle from my party dies, but it doesn't matter since it's not from the Rental Pass. I then used Lopunny to use Dizzy Punch on Snova, and I beat Elisa. Let's spin the wheel again. I got a Beautify, he got Luminion. I got a Blossom, he got Monferno. I got a Lopunny, he got Chimchar. I got a Malcongo, and he got a Jamirian. And my second opponent is Joey. I sent out Beautyfly to use Gus on Monferno. I then used Blossom to use Energy Ball on Dominion. I then used Lopunny to use Dizzy Punch on Jamirian. I then sent out Malcongo to use Walk Throw on Chimchar, which means I beat Joey. Let's spin the wheel again. I got Luminion, she got Sneasel. I got Blossom, she got Golbat. I got a Lopunny, she got a Pachirisu. And I got a Beautifly, she got a Stunky. And the next opponent is Jessica. I sent out Luminion to use Surf against both of the Pokemon. And sadly, Golbat killed Luminion by using Ring Attack. Damn you, critical hit. I sent out Lopunny to use Dizzy Punch against Golbat. I then sent out Beautifly to use Silver Wind against Pachirisu. I then used Lopunny to use Dizzy Punch against Skunky, which means I beat Jessica. Let's spin the wheel. I got a Blossom, he got an Unknown. I got a Sneasel, he got a Lopunny. I got a Coastler, he got a Beautifly. And I got a Poliwhirl and he got a Luminion. And the next opponent is Spirit. I sent out Sneasel to use X-Scissor on Unknown. And sadly, Blossom was killed by Lopunny's Dizzy Punch. Trying to use my Pokemon against me, the heck. I sent out Poliwhirl and used Water Pulse against Lopunny. And the opponent Beautify used Silver Wind on Poliwhirl, which doesn't matter since Poliwhirl is not from the Rental Pass. I then sent out Sneasel to use Ice Punch against Beautify. I also used Sneasel to use X-Scissor on Luminion. And I beat Barrett. Let's spin the wheel again. I got a Coastler, she got a Chimchar. I got a Flappy, she got a Lopunny. I got a Butterfree, she got a Golbat. I got Sneasel and she got Wigglytuff. And I'm up against another opponent, Goldie. The opponent killed Flappy by using Diesel Punch, which doesn't matter since Flappy is not from the Winter Pass. I sent out Coastal to use Rock Tomb against Lopunny. And the opponent Golbat used Ring Attack against Butterfree, which killed it, which it doesn't matter since Butterfree is not from the Winter Pass. And then sent out Sneasel to use Ice Punch against Golbat. I also used Sneasel to use Bite against Chimchar. Coastal was killed by Burn, which doesn't matter since Coastal is not from the Winter Pass. And then used Sneasel to use Ice Punch against Wigglytuff. And I beat Goldie. Let's spin the wheel again. I got Lopunny, he got Golbat. I got Sneasel, he got Pidgeotto. I got a Lumineon, which I can't use because it died. He got Blossom, I got Lulu, and he got Apom. And now I'm in the semifinals against Craig. I sent out Sneasel to use Ice Punch against Pidgeotto. I also used Sneasel to use Ice Punch against Golbat. And sadly, Sneasel was killed by Blossom's Energy Ball. Damn you, Blossom, I thought you were on the other side. I then sent out Lopunny to use Flame Punch against Apom. And sadly, Lopunny was killed by Blossom's Energy Ball. What the hell, man? And then sent out Riolu to use Force Palm against Blossom. Hopefully it doesn't kill any more of my Pokemon. This means I beat Craig. Let's spin the wheel again. I got a Golbat, she got a Skiploom. I got a Beautifly, she got a Lopunny. I got another Beautifly, she got a Sunflower. And I got a Dominion, which I can't use because it's dead. And she got a Blossom. Now I'm up against the boss of the Colosseum, Rosie. I sent out Golbat to use Ring Attack on Skiploom. I sent out Beautifly to use Gus against Sunflower. And sadly, Beautifly was killed by Blossom's Sludge Bomb. But did half my team really get killed by this thing? And the other Beautifly was killed by nobody's Easy Punch, which doesn't matter since the other Beautifly was not from the Winter Pass. I then sent out Golbat to use Ring Attack against a little green demon, Blossom. I then used Golbat again to use Ring Attack against Lopunny. I beat Rosie and cleared the Neon Coliseum with 5 casualties. Use the new Winter Pass. Now I am in the Crystal Coliseum and my first opponent is Larissa. I sent out Hunter to use Sludge Bomb against Luciana. I also sent out Mariana to use Fire Fang against Snowball. I then used Hunter to use Giga Drain against Celio. And I also used Mariana to use Fire Fang against Castform. I beat Larissa and my next opponent is Hayden. I sent out B-Barrel to use Waterfall against Vibrava. I then sent out Metang to use Psychic against Mosstop. I then used B-Barrel to use Waterfall against Wormadam. I then sent out Hunter to use Giga Drain against Gabite. I beat Hayden and my next opponent is Roten. I sent out Hunter to use Giga Drain against Graveler. I then sent out B-Barrel to use Waterfall against Barnsley. I then used Hunter again to use Giga Drain on Machoke. I then sent out Metang to use Psychic against Wigglytuff. I beat Roten and my next opponent is Marcus. I sent out Hunter and used Giga Drain on Whitehorn. I then sent out B-Barrel to use Waterfall against Graveler. I then used B-Barrel again to use Waterfall against Gibble. I then sent out Rotom to use Charge Beam against Wartortle. I beat Marcus and now bound against the boss of the Coliseum, Bodon. I sent out Hunter to use Sludge Bomb against Elekid. And sadly, the opponent Machoke used Rock Slide and killed Hunter. I sent out Sandslash to use Aerial Ace against Machoke. And sadly, the opponent Rotom used Shadow Ball and killed Sandslash. I then sent out Mariana to use Bite against Rotom. I then used Mariana again to use Ice Fang against Onix. I beat Bodon and cleared the Crystal Coliseum with only 2 casualties. I'm now in the Sonic Park Coliseum and my first opponent is Tasha. I sent out Mariana to use Bite against Combusken. I then sent out Golbat to use Ring Attack against Delcatty. And Mariana also killed Luxio. And I used Mariana again to use Fire Fang against Metapod. I defeated Tasha and my next opponent is Cortez. I used Mariana to kill both Graveler and Butterfree. I sent out Golbat to use Ring Attack against Machoke. I then used Golbat again to use Ring Attack against Rosaria. I beat Cortez and my next opponent is Patrick. I sent out Mariana to use Fire Fang against Kricketune. And I used Mariana again to use Bite against Lickitung. I then used my tank to use Psychic against Apom. I I then used Mariana to use Bite against Unknown. I beat Patrick and my next opponent is Logan. I sent out Rotom to use Ominous Wind against Wormadam. And I used Rotom again to use Jaws Beam against Wigglytuff. And thanks to the burn, it killed Butterfree. I then sent out Rotom to use Jaws Beam against Loftus. I beat Logan and my next opponent is Hannah. I sent out Golbat to use Wing Attack against Mudchoke. I then sent out B-Barrel to use Waterfall against Graveler. And I used B-Barrel again to use Waterfall against Chimchar. I then sent out Golbat to use Wing Attack against Butterfree. I beat Hannah and my next opponent is Ian. I used Mariana to beat Celio. I then used Mariana again to use Bite against Luxio. I then used Metang to use Psychic against Plusle. I then used Metang again to use Psychic against Minun. I beat Ian and now I'm bound against the boss of the Coliseum, Sashay. I sent out Golbat to use Wing Attack against Durham. I used Golbat again to use Wing Attack against Nobunny. And sadly, Golbat was killed by Plusle's Thunderbolt. And as revenge, I sent out Mariana to use Bite against Plusle. And I also used Mariana to beat Suckle. I beat Sasay and cleared the Sunny Park Coliseum. For the next Coliseum, it is a select battle Coliseum, which means I can use only 4 out of the 12 Pokemon that are sold in the screen. That means none of the Pokemon from the Winter Pass can die in this Coliseum. The Winter Pass Pokemon are safe for now. Now I am at the Sunset Coliseum and my first opponent is Stewart. I sent out Vulpix to use Flamethrower against Victory Bell. I then sent out Rotom to use Thundersuck against Monferno. I then used Rotom again to use Ominous Wind against Graveler. I then sent out Graveler to use Rock Blast against Plusle. I beat Stewart and my next opponent is Grace. I then sent out Dragonair to use Dragon Rays on Shelgon. I continue to use Dragonair to use Dragon Rays on Dragonair. I then used Dragonair again to use Dragon Rays on Chimchar. I then sent out Goodbye to use Dragon Rays on Monferno. I beat Grace and my next opponent is Tamara. I sent out Vulpix to use Flamethrower on Carnivine. I then sent out Pelipper to use Wall Pulse on Mawile. And I used Pelipper again to use Wall Pulse on Vulpix. I then used Vulpix to use Flamethrower on Lombre. I beat Tamara and now I'm bound against the boss of the Coliseum, Dusty. I sent out Graveler to use Rock Blast on Kabuskin. The opponent's Vigoroth killed Goodbye by using Body Slam, but it doesn't matter since Goodbye is not from the Winter Pass. And the opponent Luxio killed Graveler by using Ice Fang, but it also doesn't matter since Graveler is not from the Winter Pass. I sent out Vigoroth to use Body Slam on Vigoroth. And the opponent Luxio killed Riolu with Fog, but it doesn't matter since Riolu is not from the Winter Pass. I then used Vigoroth to use Body Slam on Luxio. And I used Vigoroth again to use Body Slam on Grovyle. I beat Dusty and cleared the Sunset Coliseum. Here's the next Winter Pass. Now we're doing the Magma Coliseum and my first opponent is Lawrence. I sent out Seadra to use Bubble Beam against Pupitar. I then used Seadra again to use Bubble Beam against Graveler. And because of how OP Seadra is, it used Bubble Beam against Jamirian. I beat Lawrence and my next opponent is Krista. I sent out Torchic to use Flamethrower against Victory Bell. I then sent out Vesper Queen to use Aerial Ace against Venomoth. I then sent out Pikachu to use Discharge against Torchic. I beat Krista and my next opponent is Robert. I sent out Jerem to use Solar Beam against Jingling. I then sent out Pikachu to use Discharge against Pelipper. I then sent out Jerem to use Solar Beam against Majoke. I beat Robert and my next opponent is Norman. I sent out Dugtrio to use Magnitude against Crowlava. I then used Dugtrio again to use Magnitude against Jamirian. I then sent out Vesper Green to use Area Ace against Butterfree. I beat Norman and my next opponent is Christine. I sent out Torchic to use Flamethrower against Grovyle. I then used Torchic again to use Flamethrower against Masquerain. I then used Jerem to use Solar Beam against Sandslash. I beat Christine, which leads to the boss of the Coliseum, Karel. I sent out Seadra to use Bubble Beam against Monferno. And sadly, the opponent Plimplum used Ice Beam and killed Torchic. Shit. I then sent out Pikachu to use Discharge against Plimplum. Sadly, the opponent Jamirian used Flamethrower and killed Pikachu. Shit. I then sent out Seadra to use Bubble Beam against Jamirian. I beat Terrell and clear the Magma Coliseum. And this is the last and final winter pass the game is giving me. Now we are in the Courtyard Coliseum and my first opponent is Damien. I sent out Camelot to use Lava Plume, which killed the Nuzleaf. I then sent out Sudowoodo to use Rock Slide, which killed the Minun. And because of the burn, it killed the Rotom. I then sent out Philoswine to use Ice Fang against Luxio. I beat Damien and my next opponent is Daniela. I sent out Mug to use Brick Break against Bassodon. I then used Mug again to use Brick Break against Mawile. I then sent out Hypno to use Fire Punch against Magneton. I then used Hypno again to use Fire Punch against Metang. I beat Daniela and my next opponent is Dimitri. Thanks to the Sandstorm, it killed the opponent's Staravia. And also thanks to the Sandstorm, it killed the opponent's Golbat. I then sent out Machoke to use Ice Punch against Graveler. I then sent out Philoswine to use Ice Fang against Muglo. I beat Dimitri and my next opponent is Brenda. I sent out Sudowoodo to use Rock Slide and killed Magneton. I then sent out Machoke to use Dynamic Punch against Beedrill. I also used Machoke to use Dynamic Punch against Larion. And sadly, the opponent's Voltortle used Wall Pulse and killed the Machoke. I then sent out Philoswine to use Body Slam against Voltortle. I beat Brenda and my next opponent is Benny. I sent out Sudowoodo to use Rock Slide and killed Jamirian. I then sent out Philoswine to use Ice Fang against Hunter. I then used Sudowoodo again to use Rock Slide against Mafono. And I used Sudowoodo again to use Rock Slide against Duskull. I beat Benny and my next opponent is Jackie. I sent out Mug to use Sludge against Butterfree. And I used Mug again to use Sludge against Wormadam. I then sent out Hypno to use Fire Punch against Fire Plume. And I used Hypno again to use Fire Punch against Riolu. I beat Jackie and now I'm bound against the boss of the Coliseum, Kruger. Sadly, the opponent's Victory Bell used Magical Leaf and killed Sudowoodo. Shit. I then sent out Camelot to use Lava Plume and killed Victory Bell. And sadly, Camelot was killed by Gligar's Earthquake. I then used Hypno to use Ice Punch against Gligar. And sadly, Hypno was killed by Swallow's Hyper Beam. I then sent out Mug to use Stunner Punch against Swallow. I then used Mug again to use Sludge against Hitmontop. I beat Kruger and cleared the Courtyard Coliseum. I'm in the last Coliseum, the Stargazer Coliseum, and my first opponent is Taylor. I sent out Philoswine to use Earthquake, which killed both Luxio and Barnsley. I then sent out Rotom to use Ominous Wind against Kirlia. I then used Rotom again to use Charge Beam against Love Disc. I beat Taylor and my next opponent is Marina. I sent out Dragonair to use Shockwave against Farfetch. I also used Dragonair to use Shockwave against Linian. I then sent out Rotom to use Charge Beam against Poliwhirl. I then used Rotom again to use Charge Beam against Kosla. I beat Marina and my next opponent is Rosie. I sent out Mariana to use Fire Fang against Beautifly. I then sent out Vesper Queen to use Area Ace against Skiploom. I then sent out Mug to use Sludge against Weeping Bell. I then used Mug again to use Sludge against Rosalia. I beat Rosie and my next opponent is Boldon. I sent out Mariana to use Fire Fang against Metang. I also used Mariana to use Fire Fang against Codivine. I then sent out Mug to use Sour Punch against Rotom. And sadly, the opponent's Machoke used Submission and killed Dragonair. I then sent out Mug to use Sludge against Machoke. I beat Boldon and my next opponent is Terrell. And for some reason, the opponent's Prinplup used Surf, which critical hit its own Pokemon, killing Maferno. I then sent out Rotom to use Charge Beam against Prinplup. I then sent out Mug to use Sludge against Gordo. And thanks to the poison, it killed Quilava. I beat Terrell and my next opponent is Dusty. I sent out Mug to use Sludge against Grovyle. I then sent out Mariana to use Ice Fang against Gabite. I then sent out Rotom to use Ominous Wind against Kabuskin. I then used Mug again to use Sludge against Riolu. I beat Dusty and now I'm bound against the final boss of the game, Mysterio. I sent out Mariana to use Ice Fang against Dragonair. I also used Mariana to use Ice Fang against Golbat. And sadly, the opponent's Kingler used Crabhammer and killed the Rotom, which sucks because I actually like Rotom. Also, the Kingler killed the Mariana with Exeggutor, which sucks. I set up Vesper Queen to use Attack Order on Kingler. Then use Vesper Queen again to use Attack Order on Westcash. Defeat Mysterio, clear the Stargazer Coliseum, and beat the Pokemon Battle Revolution Nuzlocke.